The year is 1700. A harsh winter descends upon the Baltic, and with it, the storm of war. This is the Great Northern War, a conflict that will reshape Northern Europe forever. On one side, the mighty Swedish Empire, a dominant military power for nearly a century. On the other, a new coalition led by the ambitious Tsar Peter the Great of Russia, determined to break Swedish dominance and secure a port on the Baltic Sea. The first major clash of this titanic struggle is about to unfold at the fortress of Narva, in modern-day Estonia. A massive Russian army, numbering somewhere between 35 and 40,000 men, has laid siege to the Swedish-held city. The Russian soldiers, many of them new recruits, are clad in their distinctive long green coats, ready to overwhelm the small Swedish garrison of just 1,500 defenders. Their commander, a foreign mercenary named Charles Eugene de Croo, has established a formidable siege line, a double rampart of earthworks stretching for 7 kilometers, effectively trapping the fortress. For weeks, Russian cannons have bombarded Narva's walls, but the stubborn Swedes refuse to yield. Tsar Peter, confident in his numerical superiority, awaits the inevitable surrender, but he has underestimated his opponent. From the west, a force is coming. It is the main Swedish army, led by the king himself, the 18-year-old Charles XII. Many dismissed him as a boy, a mere youth thrust onto a throne too large for him. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Charles has just forced Denmark out of the war with a bold landing near Copenhagen. Now, his attention is fixed on Narva. His army is small, dangerously small. Only about 10,500 men, including the king's elite Trabant guard, march to relieve the siege. They are outnumbered at least 3 to 1. The Swedish march is a brutal ordeal. The weather is unforgiving, a relentless mix of snow, sleet, and freezing rain. Roads have turned to mud, supply lines are stretched thin, and the soldiers are exhausted and hungry. Russian advance parties, led by General Boris Sheremetev, harass them at every turn, fighting sharp skirmishes in the frozen forests. Yet, the Swedes press on, driven by an iron will that mirrors their young king's. Charles leads from the front, sharing the hardships of his men, his presence a constant source of inspiration. On the 29th of November, they finally break through the last of the Russian screening forces and arrive before the main siege lines at Narva. The morning of November 30th, 1700, dawns cold and bleak. A blizzard rages, whipping snow and ice across the desolate landscape. The Russian army is arrayed in a long, thin line along their earthworks, confident that no army would dare attack in such conditions. Their commander, de Croo, is so certain of this that he reportedly joked that the Swedes would sooner fly than attack. Tsar Peter himself has already left the camp, believing the situation to be stable, leaving de Croo in command. It is a fatal miscalculation. For Charles XII, the blizzard is not a hindrance. It is an opportunity. It is divine providence. The wind is blowing directly from the west, straight into the faces of the Russian defenders. Under the cover of this blinding snowstorm, the Swedish king prepares his audacious assault. His army is divided into 2 main columns. The left column, under the command of General Carl Gustaf Renskild, will strike the northern flank of the Russian line. The right column, led by General Otto Velink, will hit the southern flank. Their objective is simple and terrifying: to punch through the Russian defenses, split their army in 2, and roll up their flanks. Around 2 in the afternoon, the order is given. Swedish cannons, positioned just a few hundred yards from the enemy, unleash a furious but brief barrage. Then, silence. Through the swirling snow, the beat of Swedish drums echoes across the field. With a roar of God with us, the Karolians advance. Clad in their iconic blue and yellow uniforms and tricorn hats, they march forward with pikes leveled and bayonets fixed, muskets held ready. They are a disciplined, professional force, forged in the crucible of constant warfare, their tactics centered on shock, aggression, and unwavering faith in God and their king. The Russian soldiers peering over their ramparts can see almost nothing. The snow stings their eyes, muffling all sound. Suddenly, out of the white gloom, the blue wave of the Swedish infantry appears. They are on top of the earthworks before the Russians can even react. The Swedes fire a single, devastating volley at point-blank range, then charge with cold steel. The shock is immense. Panic rips through the Russian lines. The newly recruited soldiers, many of whom have never seen battle, break and run. The Swedish left column, led by Reniskild, smashes through the northern section of the line with terrifying speed. Simultaneously, Vilink's right column crashes into the southern flank. The scene is one of utter chaos. The blizzard conceals the true number of the attackers, and to the terrified Russians, it seems as if an entire army has materialized out of the storm. Regiments dissolve into panicked mobs. Officers lose control of their men. The long, thin Russian defensive line, their greatest perceived strength, now becomes their fatal weakness. There are no reserves to plug the gaps, no way to effectively redeploy forces in the blinding snow. The two Swedish columns drive deeper and deeper, cleaving the Russian army in half. They turn inwards, trapping thousands of Russian soldiers between them. The elite Russian Guards regiments, the Preobrazhensky and Semyonovsky, offer stiff resistance on the northern flank, forming a defensive Wagenburg and fighting desperately. But elsewhere, the collapse is total. Thousands of fleeing Russian soldiers rush towards the Kamperholm bridge over the Narva River, their only escape route. The bridge, unable to bear the weight of the panicked throng, collapses. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, are thrown into the icy water to drown. The catastrophe is complete. As darkness begins to fall, the battle descends into a confused slaughter. Commander de Crau and his foreign officers, realizing the battle is lost, and fearing for their lives at the hands of their own mutinous men, surrender to the Swedes. By nightfall, the Russian army has effectively ceased to exist as a coherent fighting force. Organized resistance has collapsed, except for the pocket of guardsmen who continue to fight on bravely. The following morning, the remaining Russian generals negotiate a surrender. They are granted surprisingly lenient terms by Charles. The common soldiers are allowed to march away, leaving their weapons and standards behind. The officers are taken prisoner. The spoils of war are staggering. The Swedes capture the entire Russian artillery park, over 180 cannons, along with thousands of muskets and all the army's supplies. It is one of the most decisive and one-sided victories in military history. Charles XII, the boy king, is now hailed as a military genius, the new Alexander the Great. All of Europe is stunned. Sweden's victory at Narva seemed to confirm its status as the supreme power of the North. Yet, in this moment of absolute triumph lay the seeds of future disaster. Tsar Peter the Great was humbled, but not broken. He learned a harsh lesson at Narva, a lesson in modern warfare that he would take to heart. He would rebuild his army, reform it along western lines, and prepare for the day he would meet the Swedes again. The Battle of Narva was not the end of the Great Northern War. It was only the beginning. It was a spectacular, almost mythical victory that would define the legend of Charles XII and his Burlians. An army of 10,000 had shattered a force 3 times its size, a feat accomplished through audacious leadership, iron discipline, and the perfect exploitation of a raging snowstorm on a bleak November day. The echoes of their drums and their victory cry would resound through the annals of history, a testament to one of the most remarkable battles ever fought. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this glimpse into history, please consider subscribing for more stories from the past.